It should go without saying, really, that ghosts pop up a lot in horror stories. Traditionally, when a lot of people think of horror, they tend to think of ghosts and ghost stories. This isn't a bad thing, as ghosts can work amazingly in stories when they're done well. A really good example of ghosts being done well is the Haunting of Hill House Netflix series that came out. The ghosts there were really well crafted, and it was clear from the first episode that a lot of thought had gone into the conception and creation of them. However, despite ghosts being excellent narrative tools, they can and often are the victims of excessive cliches, all of which I believe stems from the same issue, which is a simple lack of thought. A recent example of this being when I went to see a play that I'm not going to name here. I'm not here to shame anybody, but I will say that it wasn't The Woman in Black. I feel the need to point that out. This story clearly established the ghost character. Their motivations were crystal clear, the abilities were firmly shown very early on. It was rather good if it was a tiny bit overdone. But right at the end, everything about the ghost changed. Her motivations changed completely. It went from find me to join me forever. And her abilities went from dick around with small things in the house to suddenly being able to affect things outside of the house very far away. I remember sitting in the theatre and thinking to myself, well, that writer seriously wanted a twist ending and just couldn't come up with one. I was disappointed and frustrated, to say the least. But this leads nicely into the main cliche that ghost characters suffer from. Inconsistency is pretty much my main complaint when it comes to ghost characters. In my opinion, for ghost characters to work, rules have to be established. The audience needs to understand and know what the ghost can and cannot do, and these rules have to make sense. For example, if the ghost has been shown that it can't touch and move objects in the living world, why can it suddenly make a sound like footsteps, which surely involves it touching and banging on the floor? All this rulemaking might sound a little bit dull, but it's actually far more satisfying for ground rules to be established early on, rather than the ghost suddenly able to do whatever the plot needs at the time, aka Deus Ex Machina. Limitations help the audience understand the story and allow them to become far more absorbed than they might have otherwise. But consistency goes further than that. The writer or creator needs to consider what the established rules mean in the context with other actions. As I said, if you establish that your ghost can move through walls, but in the next chapter your ghost is suddenly picking stuff up, you'd better be able to explain how a previously intangible character suddenly became tangible. How can they be intangible in some situations but not in others? Do they control their tangibility at will? Is it just a matter of willpower? Whatever it is, make sure it's explained at some point, and just be consistent. I must admit I only have a slight issue with this cliche, and it's not because it's bad, it's just because it's been overdone. That being the ghost of a dead loved one coming to the rescue. The first time I saw this in action was when I was little, watching Poltergeist 2. If you haven't seen it, then you should. It's a great film, especially considering that it's a sequel. In this film, the grandma dies, and it's sad. But it's used well to illustrate the granddaughter's ability to see and speak to the dead. Then, at the end, when the granddaughter is lost in the land of the dead, everyone cries, thinking she's lost forever. It's pretty tragic. But then, magically, the granddaughter comes back from the light, guided by, you guessed it, Ghost Grandma. The scene is so bloody sweet in the cheesiest way. The music swells, the grandma's basically made of light. She looks incredibly angelic with flowing robes, and then there's the adorable granddaughter. All in all, it combines to make a cheesy but cheerful moment. It is fantastically done. But obviously there was a but coming. This has now been done so many times, to the point where if a horror film establishes an emotional connection with a dead character, I'm already thinking that this is going to happen. Insidious Chapter 3 did this to me. They pushed the dead mum connection so much that when the teen daughter is lost in the further, you just bloody know that dead mum's gonna turn up and save the day. It didn't spoil the film for me. It's still a really good film. I love the character of Elise, and this film was a great look at her past. But the ending wasn't a surprise, not in the slightest. Ghost Mum saves the day, and because of that, the ending lost some of its impact, at least for me. But this also leads to another grumble about inconsistency. Why, when Insidious has already established how weak ghosts are, is dead mum strong enough to suddenly smash the main antagonist and rescue teen daughter with such ease? Doesn't really make sense. But what kind of ghost cliches do you tend to notice the most? Do they drive you up the wall?